Anyway, let's move on to disasters. Okay. So if I were to fully describe every environmental disaster, I'd never stop talking. And if I were to describe every important environmental disaster, this video would be like 20 hours long. So instead, I'm going to pick some to talk about and list others for you to Google on your own. You're studying, not me. I already took this exam. Okay, so let's start with the radioactive disasters first, because they sound cooler. So really the first one that's important is Fukushima and Nagasaki. So for those who don't know, Fukushima and Nagasaki were both Japanese towns where the United States dropped an atomic bomb during World War II. So we dropped this nuclear bomb on these two towns. It was absolutely devastating. The towns were both destroyed, and the effects of those bombs are still being felt today. So in Fukushima and Nagasaki, after we dropped the bomb, they basically became ground zero for discovering what happens when you bomb a place nuclearly, because we didn't know that. We still don't really know that, to be fair. But we looked at the species that lived there, how they reacted. Anyway, so that's the first important thing. Another thing to know is Chernobyl. Chernobyl is a town in the Ukraine? Russia? I think it's Ukraine. It's not really relevant. You don't need to know. Anyway, so they had this nuclear reactor there, and the scientists were like messing around with the fuel rods, like, hey Brad, I bet you I can take one of these fuel rods out. And they were like, no, you can't. And they did, and it melted down. Yeah, the whole thing kind of exploded and melted down, and it was a disaster. It was very, very bad. So what happened was the whole thing kind of collapsed, and somebody noticed that this nuclear reactor was doing something. They were like, oh man, they didn't tell the rest of the world that the thing had melted down. So then England, a couple weeks later, started detecting radiation in their air. And they were like, this is sketchy. So they started calling up all the reactors that they knew. They're like, hey, did you have a meltdown recently? Because there's some sketchy radiation going on. Eventually they found out it was Chernobyl because the government tried to hide it for a while. But no, Chernobyl, so it's released a bunch of radiation, and again, it kind of became ground zero for discovering what happens when you have a nuclear meltdown like that and what the effects are. So the radiation traveled all over Europe. The levels weren't high enough that people in Portugal were getting cancer from the radiation from Chernobyl, but people in the areas surrounding Chernobyl directly were having a lot of problems. There was a lot of cases of thyroid cancer and things like that. So that's what you need to know about Chernobyl. The next place is Bikini Atoll, which is a U.S. nuclear testing site in the Marshall Islands. So basically there's this Bikini Atoll, which is like a little ring of islands, and we had a bunch of bombs we wanted to test, so we moved all the locals off the island and we just started bombing it. Wow! Anyway, so that's another important thing because we were testing how the ground moves. That's what you need to know about Bikini Atoll.